The much anticipated June meeting of the FOMC is upon us, and all the talk is around whether there might be a rate cut coming soon, maybe in July, after Jay Powell's remarks at the Chicago Fed conference 2 weeks ago. Our own Brian Cheung is in our D.C. bureau right now, and he will be in the room when Jay Powell speaks. Hey, Cheung.
Hey, Dan.
Any sense of what we might get at this meeting this time?
Yeah, so the expectations for this Fed meeting are for the Fed to keep the current level of rates steady at the current range of 2.25 to 2.5%. But as you mentioned, all eyes and all ears will be on any sort of clues about when a rate cut could be coming in the future. Expectations are maybe that it could come as soon as the July 31st meeting. So a lot of attention paid to both the press conference that Chairman Powell will be holding at 2:30, in addition to the new round of dot plot projections that we'll receive in this meeting. Keep in mind that these only come out every quarter. So the last time that we got a release was in March. At the time, they signaled no rate changes for the rest of 2019 and maybe one rate hike in 2020. Wall Street says for that fact, they expect the 2020 expectation to go down by 25 basis points.
Yeah, Brian, everyone after Powell's remarks recently started to assume that we'll get a cut, whether it's in July or sometime in the next couple months. And yet many now think that after that Trump tweet just yesterday or 2 days ago that had some encouraging sentiment around the trade situation, that maybe a cut is now off the table.
Yeah, so for what it's worth, President Trump was on a tweet storm yesterday. He was pointing to some remarks from the European Central Bank president, that's Mario Draghi, who mentioned yesterday that the ECB could provide additional stimulus if it felt that downside risks were still present in the euro area. President Trump said that that led to a strengthening of the dollar, which he felt was unfair. In actually 3 instances, he said that it was unfair. What's interesting is that President Trump is also making remarks publicly. He actually spoke on the tarmac yesterday amid reports that he was considering demoting Jay Powell. This was back in February, but Bloomberg reporting this yesterday. For what it's worth, he was asked about whether or not he was still considering demoting Powell, and the quote that he said on the tarmac of the White House yesterday was, quote, "Let's see what he does," and later adding that, frankly, it helped that part of the world what the European Central Bank did, and that he wants a, quote, level playing field, hinting that he would also like the Federal Reserve to lower rates. And again, as I mentioned, no expectation for that to happen in today's meeting, but there is a chance the Federal Reserve could tee one up given the issues that we've seen in trade, in addition to kind of more pessimistic economic data, and maybe that gets teed up for July or later meetings this year.
You know, Brian, on that topic, Bloomberg today with a report saying that, you know, they got on the record comment from the Fed about the legality of Trump getting rid of Powell. That, you know, they reiterated the view that he has to be removed for cause. I mean, I guess at this point, right, you and I have talked so much about how, well, Trump's just saying stuff. The market doesn't really think he's going to remove Powell. But obviously, it seems like he might actually try to do that, right? I mean, it kind of feels like Trump may view Powell as a problem as he tries to get reelected in 2020. And I know that in that room, which we're both in, it's pretty cordial in terms of, you know, not asking Powell directly about Trump and all that kind of stuff. But it feels like at some point, right, that is going to be a big part of Powell's conversation with the press.
Yeah, that's a great point that you make. I mean, the relationship between the Federal Reserve and the press is a very formal one. I mean, yes, it's cordial in the room, but it's kind of an understood type of format in terms of what types of questions you ask. You don't kind of ask kind of more casual questions about individual relationships among Fed members, but they provided an on-the-record statement to Bloomberg saying that, look, the statute very clearly says that the Federal Reserve chair can only be removed for cause. That's never happened in the past, but the fact that the Federal Reserve is providing something on the record, I can tell you as a reporter that's been covering this for years, is extremely rare. And it's making the point that, yes, the White House explored the legality of removing Powell or demoting him. And for those that are kind of unfamiliar with what a demotion might refer to, I presume that it's probably trying to remove him as chair and then leave him in a governor's role, still on the Board of Governors. There is no mechanism to do that. However, the Federal Reserve Act does allow a sitting chair to be removed for cause, but there's no precedent for that ever having happened in the past. So it's unclear what that means. It's probably not up to a court, or no court would probably say that there's a for cause case to remove a chair simply because he's raising rates while the president would prefer otherwise. But it's interesting because as we've seen the president kind of explore the legality of this, of changing around the board, he's also tried to nominate a number of characters onto the board like Herman Cain, like Stephen Moore, not necessarily as Fed chairman, but it does raise this other opportunity of switching up the Fed board, which is simply putting new members on the board because he's been so happy with who's been there for right now. Again, the only way that you can really bump a chair down for the time being would be to nominate a new chair. And as we've seen with the likes of Cain and Moore, that has been an extremely tough task to do.
All right, Brian Cheung, we've got that Fed meeting today, and I'm sure we will see you popping up on all our live shows all day. Thanks, Brian.